our principles were, first of all, that we're not necessarily in this country talking about single individuals with complete identities for every single service that they consume. So we have to deal with the fact that different people have different identities at the moment. And those identities can change through the day as well as through different life events. So, for example, I might go on and inquire about something and at a separate occasion want to do something about it. And one has to accept that people might just, at one end of the scale, want to be completely anonymous in their consumption of services, even if it's just information. We also have to accept that identity includes the people who are acting on our behalf. So it might be my pension records that are in question, but it might be my advisor who's actually wanting to consume the service around my pension records. So that's really, really complex. And service design around understanding that it may not just be the direct relationship with the consumer is quite difficult. We started talking about, so how is this different in public and private? Can we learn from the private sector? And of course, private sector can choose their customers. Public sector often can't. Sometimes can. You can tell some consumers to bog off. But most of the time you can't. You have to deliver the service that you are providing to that consumer. You can't say go elsewhere, go into the market. Which is slightly different. You can't do the straightforward Amazon trick there. But what we can learn from the private sector is the private sector uses value propositions. I can do this differently from the way I used to do it before because. So can we turn services around that individual and understand their needs from the point of view of why they would do it differently this way rather than another way, rather than trying to do it from the design perspective? What do we know about our customers? And a good example of this is, for example, the car tax being able to do everything in one go rather than have to go to different providers of that service, so reaggregation of the service. Enablers and blockers. A big enabler is to actually understand better the life cycle, the user journey, how complex our lives are. We had a brilliant innovation, which is if you take all of those life cycles, all of those swim lanes, and start looking at the individual interactions, it's quite common for those interactions to be repeatable in other instances, but we tend not to think about that because we're just trying to design one service, whereas some of those interactions might pop up in other places.
Examples in mind?
Stefan, can you think of any examples that came to mind?
It's really that the context in which you want to do a simple atomic transaction will be a function of where you are in life, and people do those simple atomic transactions in all sorts of different ways at different times. So almost anything is an example.
Well, one example is it's not only when I approach my retirement age that I want to understand about pensions. I might also need to know about it when I'm 18 and just starting my first job, and I might need to come back and refresh that. And what are the triggers that make me do that? There are some statutory triggers, but there are also some market-driven triggers, if you like. My financial advisor might say, when was the last time you checked to see that you're saving enough? So there's all sorts of things that you might come back to at different times in your life, at different stages. Is that a good enough example?
Yeah.
Not to ask how to do it better. But I can't read that one.
Not to ask how do I do it better on direct go, but the question how do I not do it? Do I
Oh,
not
yes.
need to do it at all?
Sometimes a consumer of a service might actually want to know how they can not have to consume that service. They might actually want their tax advisor to find out about how you can avoid paying tax, and that has to be part of our design, unfortunately, because that is something people would want to do. If we're going to really make this user-centered, we also have to address that question, which is how can I avoid doing what all the other stuff I've read suggests that we might have to.
There's a similar